Hi, I'm Greg Farrar. It is June 16th, and this is my COVID-19 trends analysis. I'm going to make this one probably a little shorter than usual. Let's see if I can actually keep this one to a half an hour. I'm going to dive right in. So, on the countries level, United States leading, Brazil next, Russia after that. India has now passed the UK. And I guess I can see down there, is that Spain? Well, yeah, Spain and Italy definitely no longer in the running, even in total numbers, even considering the whole history. But let's move on to daily cases per million. Adjusted for population, Qatar continues to be the biggest one, and its neighbor Bahrain with 500 plus, but this has been dropping steadily for a couple weeks now. We've seen Qatar level off and drop. So Qatar is definitely getting better. Not at all clear that Bahrain is, though eventually it will. But this is another example of the sort of slope that we usually see. Linear rise, short peak, and then slightly slower descent. We'll see whether that continues with Qatar. We can see that also, for instance, with Kuwait. Linear rise, short peak, linear descent, a little slower than the rise. In daily cases per million, Chile is still way up there in the running. Brazil really isn't. You might think Brazil was, but Brazil isn't. Brazil is actually, I think, leveled off and is now descending, though the trend line doesn't quite show it. But Brazil at 140, that's a fair number, but you can see that all these are up in the 200s. So Brazil is kind of in the, I can't even pick it out of this group here. It's in the warm pack. These are the 5 hotspot countries in terms of DCPM are Qatar, Bahrain, Chile, Oman, and Armenia. Notice that none of those are the countries we originally heard about. None of those are super high population countries. Indeed, many of them are very small population countries, which suggests, at least to me, that we're seeing a trend towards recovery in the sense that the big countries have mostly gotten it and mostly gotten over it. We'll see whether this new thing in China blows up. It's in some sense maybe China never really got it, and they may be the next hotspot. We may actually see a second wave somewhere for a change. But it's way too early to say that. Normally when we see something like this pack of 100 new cases in Beijing, normally when we see something like that, it evaporates quickly. So, and certainly China is doing everything it needs to be able to put a lid on it. It's got good healthcare response and lockdown and a totalitarian state, which helps. So of the warm spots, there are a number: Panama, Peru, Brazil, Kuwait we saw is declining quickly. Peru also, we're really starting to see a peak, I think, in the Central South America cluster as we see Brazil. It's not obvious from here, but Brazil is peaking, has peaked. Peru has definitely peaked, and Chile is still going strong, but those are, Central South America, the biggest contributors, the biggest populations, and the hottest countries seem to be getting better. Looking at the rope chart of the hottest countries, still not looking great. We have a lot of cases above, a lot of countries above 0. Russia here exactly at 0. Honduras is growing pretty strongly at 9%. Saudi Arabia, Macedonia, Moldova, South Africa, Sweden, Panama. It takes pretty far down the list before we get to some of the big names that we saw before. Sweden is making a comeback, which is a little alarming. Almost nobody else has. Generally, when a country has gotten over it, it's stayed over it. There was an editorial in the it was in the Wall Street Journal, I think today. I'm pretty sure it was by Vice President Mike Pence, I thought it was interesting how much his analysis aligns with what I've been talking about. His purpose, of course, is to make the Trump administration look good. But there are a lot of numbers you can point to that do that. And he's pushing back against this alarmism around these few very hot states we have in the United States right now, and saying, look, the deaths are tremendously lower than they used to be. And I haven't been talking about deaths lately, but I was noticing just the other day that deaths are a fifth or a sixth what they used to be in the United States overall. So even though the cases are rising, deaths are dropping. They just keep dropping. So there's a fair bit still to be optimistic about. We're not over the heap. If we look at the United States here, not over the hump, we look at the United States here, it keeps dropping. This number, 0.5%, I think was 0.6% in growth, but nevertheless, the United States is very slightly growing, and it appears to be very slightly accelerating from this line, though just judging from the way this number keeps dropping every day I look at it, I think it actually is decelerating, and the trend line hasn't noticed it yet. The United States had, for instance, yesterday they had a whole week that was about 2% negative growth average per day. So the United States still so-so, but certainly nothing to be super worried about. In terms of hot growth spots, they're all small countries, mostly small countries. Sweden is weird, an outlier in that, but still not a huge contributor of cases. Brazil, that's the data point for Brazil. Let's just look at Brazil again, because Brazil, I think, is the news of the week as far as I'm concerned. Well, Brazil has been turning the corner and still is, but it just had a bad day, or the past week is not looking, this is 7 days, the average of 7 days ending today, today. And that's not actually looking as good as the previous 4. It had a real trend downward there, where 4 weeks, 4 days in a row the previous week had been negative growth. Now they have one bad one. It's nothing to make a trend out of, and the overall trend, certainly obviously downward, steadily downward, appears to have crossed zero. And so Brazil, they're heading towards recovery. Brazil, one of the most troubling countries in the past few weeks, now looking better. And there are a lot of countries looking better in the top 25 here. The very best, well, I don't even know that country. I'm getting an education doing this series. Kuwait, Qatar, Singapore, Belarus. A lot of countries doing well. And really, if you look at this chart, if you pull back from this chart, there are a lot of lines that are angled downward here. And this wasn't really the case. I think even a few days ago, even a week ago, there was more of a bifurcation of the upward trending ones that are growing and accelerating, and the lower downward trending ones that are shrinking and accelerating in that direction. Now, I think almost all the lines we see are trending downwards. Though many of them are above zero, so they're still growing, they're all heading towards recovery, with those few exceptions. Sweden, oddly, Moldova, Saudi Arabia, and Honduras. If we look at the world as a whole, very, very messy graph, just intended to get a very broad look at where all the countries are going. I'm not going to point at any particular countries here probably, but there are some countries doing really well. I'll point to a couple of them. Sri Lanka and Chad doing extraordinarily well in recovery. Uganda, the biggest and the smallest always tend to be the small countries. Somewhere here in the middle are all those countries that we once talked about. Let's look at just a few of them. Let's look at Italy, for instance. Italy used to be a big name. Well, it's been dropping, or it's been low and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking for weeks and weeks. Now we do have a little bit of a trend upwards here, a slight trend, a few days of growth. Italy's showing maybe a little less than 1% growth. So maybe Italy is also heading it backwards, upward a little bit, like the United States did, like we saw with, like we're seeing with Sweden. France also a little bit. I guess I'm seeing a trend of Europe coming back, losing its grip on the recovery a little bit, but just a little bit. Nothing to be worried about yet. It may just be as things open up, we see these slight boosts of new cases, bursts of new cases. India, we'll take a quick look at, because India has always been very concerning. certainly has potential to have a whole lot of people sick because it has a whole lot of people, but India is looking pretty good. It's just very slowly heading towards that zero line, still growing 1% a day, maybe 1.5%, but trending towards zero, and the latest week is under 1%. All right, I could talk about a lot of things, but I want to keep this one moving quickly today. So, if we look at if we look worldwide, the cases are still growing. It's been hanging out at about 1% in the whole world, 1% daily growth, which is actually a fairly high growth. That's hundreds of percent a year if it persists. However, the trend is very slightly downward. We'll see if this persists, but for some weeks now, there's been a trend, a couple weeks, a very slightly downward trend for the whole world, heading towards zero, where it used to be at 1.4%, now it's at 0.9%, heading downward. The world's starting to look a little better. Testing, as always, well, testing in the world is a real grab bag, so it sometimes looks good. Some countries look extraordinarily good, some not so much. Just for fun, some of the best ones right now are Russia and Qatar. Worth noting, those two are recovering. Is it because they're testing immensely? Probably doesn't hurt. Moving on to the states of the United States. Uh-oh, I've been seeing this. I thought I fixed this. My graphs are all screwed up. I don't know why. I can easily fix them, but this is troubling because this is now live. And so anybody who goes to this website sees these messed up graphs. But I just had them working 5 minutes before, and then they were broken 20 minutes before. So I don't know how they keep re-breaking, but I'll have to keep zooming in to find them. Oh, I'm not going to get trend lines either. Well, this might be a very short one. If we're not going to get trend lines, I'm going to try reloading, just see what happens. Back in the day when I was using this in the Databricks platform, I was able to recover lost trend lines by zooming in or by reloading. All right, I really am not going to talk much today. This is going to be a short one. I'll do what I can with the dots, but the dots, they're certainly useful here, so maybe I'll spend most of my time on this report, but the dots are practically useless on other reports. We really need those trend lines to make sense of what the different places are doing. I guess they can be useful if I zoom in on particular states. Let's look at, I wonder if the counties are screwed up too. What I really wonder is how this re-broke itself in 5 minutes when I haven't even regenerated these. How does that happen? Okay, let's look at a few states. I'm going to zoom this also down into a more reasonable range for DCPM. Daily cases per million, we see Arizona still, it's had some hot moments. The past couple days are looking better, but it's still warm. Similarly, Arkansas, not similarly. Arkansas, I don't know what the trend line would draw here, but if I had to guess my own trend line, I'd say this is still headed upward. We've had a good day, but we have what looks like a trend upward in Arkansas. So the 3A states, Alabama, Arkansas, and Arizona, all still trending upwards, all above that 100 line that makes them warm, touching into being hot spots. South Carolina also. And Utah, though, Utah had been one of those 5. Utah seems to be headed for recovery. I think we'll see that in the rope chart. Maybe we won't have any lines in the rope chart, so it's going to be hard to see. But from what I saw earlier today when these graphs were working better, Utah seems to be recovering and is heading in a much better direction. We're again going to have to pull these apart to get any kind of reasonable numbers from them, but broadly speaking, Arizona is a little above the line. Now, if I had to connect the dots, I would say that Arizona is probably trending downward in the short term. It used to be up here, now it's around 0. So that could be good news for Arizona. Arkansas, less so. It's all over the place, but this looks like a horizontal line to me, probably around 10%. So Arkansas is doing pretty poorly still, and Alabama, hard to say. but a lot of points above zero here, and again, somewhere around that 10% line. We're not going to be able to do much with these. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna move on from the states just to say not a whole lot changes in a couple days. If you want to see what's happening with states, look at the yesterday's blog over here, or look at the YouTube video from 2 days ago, and that'll give you a pretty good sense. Come on, show it to me. No, it's not going to do it either. I'm going to try one more thing here on a different screen, just in case this is going to cooperate for me. Otherwise, I'm going to throw in the towel here. Actually, no, that screen's not going to work either. All right, well, I said it'd be a short one. I'll do a, I'll try to get this stuff fixed up by tomorrow. There's something that goes on here where for some reason it thinks I have data from 1970, and that first of all spreads the graph out over decades, which gives me my weird numbers, and secondly, it loses me my trend lines, which don't know what to do when we've got that much of a range. I'll see if I can at least get a little bit of a sense of what the daily cases per million are for the counties. For Imperial, I think it's still going up. Typically, Imperial has been around 700. We had some really high days. Hard to say without the line. Tulare, looking pretty bad still. If I had to guess, I'd say it's around 300 in daily cases per million. That was Kings, actually, 300. Pretty hot. Tulare also probably heading upward at maybe 200. Its latest, one thing I can say is the latest week averages to 200 daily cases per million, even without the trend line. And here's Riverside, which suddenly has a peak. This is only 1 point, but it is an average of 7 days. So Riverside's looking pretty high. Santa Barbara also looks like it may be heading up here. Without my lines and without my good graphs, I'm not going to go much further today. Don't have data to work with. So I'll just go back to the one that is good. The countries. No, it isn't. Wow, even the countries. So you actually saw a transition there from the good graphs to the bad graphs. Maybe next time I'll just I'll load this as 3 tabs in case it gets messed up. But I think by next time I'll have this figured out. But from early in the graph, countries, the world as a whole is still slightly rising. It's growing, but the growth trend is dropping. So there's a little bit of good news there at the world level. And that's the news, the truncated news. We are experiencing technical difficulties. I'll try if I can to do another video tomorrow, but it's a travel day for me, so there's a chance I won't be able to. But come to the website, gregfarrar.us. Come to the website. Hopefully later today I'll have something up and running again, and you'll be able to see it. Maybe I'll even just redo this episode later today. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'll be back when this works. I'm Greg Farrar.